Okay, hold on. I'm going to read a little for you guys. Hi, I'm Rob. Okay, here we go. So this is the beginning of the book, chapter 1. So I had the load in front, and Jordan had the load in back, and Jordan was saying cash, cash, cash. I looked up, and there were 8 to 10 guys streaming into the lobby with more artillery than you have ever seen, and it just looked too real. I figured they had to be water pistols because they looked too detailed, too significant, too vivid to be really real. My mind slowed everything down, like Joe Montana, like Larry Bird. At first I thought, this is Jordan's birthday. These are friends of Jordan's that I don't know. And then I thought, no, this is a joke. This is a joke, and these are friends of Jordan's that I don't know, even though I know all of Jordan's friends. And then I was spun around and saw myself in the lobby mirror with one of those cylinder machine guns at the base of my brain and another gun at my side and one to the middle of my back. They swung me around. One guy was pistol whipping Jordan on the ground as they dragged me to the elevator. At the elevator, there was a very prominent sign that read, "No more than 5 people on the elevator at one time." So all 8 of us got on. It stalled. One of the guys brought out one of those huge hammer jobs that belong on an anvil and started hammering the side of the elevator. I can get the car moving again. And they responded, "You better not do anything stupid." I had 3 guns on me and I was cuffed. What am I, Bruce Lee? I placed my foot on the sliding door of the elevator and pushed it open, and that reactivated whatever ancient mechanism was on the fritz. We were on our way up. I told the guys about Tybalt, my dog, the love of my life, the reason I dragged my ass out of bed in the morning, usually clobbered with a hangover mean enough to paralyze a small county. They said that if he did anything, they would have to shoot him. One of the guys, Andy, I would find out later, said, overlapping, "Look, I got dogs. I know how you feel. I'll let you in the apartment first if you can settle him down. And if he seems okay, we won't shoot him." I didn't give a shit about myself at that moment. If they shot my dog, I'd be next. I opened the door. I spoke to Tybalt. He understood immediately that I was in deep shit, that this was no time for monkey business. He backed up slowly, carefully. No fast moves, giving the semi-frenzied men a wide berth so they knew that this was their ball game, that everyone else's rules were out the window. His paws were practically up. Then he sat solemn and calm to cool everyone off. It worked. The pack of humans took a collective breath, and in a couple of brief but precious seconds, everything went from scary to just really bad. And everyone's trigger fingers seemed to relax. I knew these guys were some kind of cowboys, superhero cops. As we entered the apartment, the first word out of anybody's mouth were not Miranda, but "Where's the cash? Where's the cash?" There was no Miranda warning until we were well into the apartment. There was our first load, a refrigerator box filled with 250 pounds of dope standing sentinel in the dining room like an upright coffin. And there were all the other accoutrements, hefty trash bags to be filled, bounce to offset the scent, duffel bags from the now sadly defunct Morris Brothers, a neighborhood store across the street that had been around since before NBC had a color peacock, which would be later filled with pot to sell to other drug dealers, and a scale. We were caught on the shitter in the midst of shitting. The TV was on in the living room. The Knicks playing the Larry Bird Celtics. One of the guys started doing dips on an exercise bar I'd set up near the TV to work on my lower pecs and triceps when there was a game on. He could barely hoist himself up once, but there was something in his bumbling effort that made him seem almost sweet. Ralph Scott, soon to be revealed as the bad cop, asked me again where the cash was. I said I didn't know. He indicated the refrigerator box filled with 250 pounds of pot and asked me if that was for personal use. I told him no. He asked what the bounce was for, and I told him. He asked me what the trash bags were for, and I told him. He asked me who Jordan was. I told him Jordan was in charge. He nodded at the jar of Vaseline on the table in front of me, which I kept handy to smear on my winter chapped lips, and suggested I would need that in prison. He wasn't very nice. And it dawned on me that maybe I should stop answering Ralph's questions and talk to a lawyer. This time we left the apartment at 2 shifts, so we wouldn't stall the elevator. Amazingly, we didn't run into any other tenants while leaving the building. I gave the narky doorman a look because he always stared at me like I was up to something, and I was sure he was the one who tipped off the Drug Enforcement Agency. On the way out, I twisted my body Houdini style so my fingertips could sneak out the apartment keys to give the doorman so someone could take care of Tybalt. Jordan had disappeared. They shoved me into the cruiser. I looked out at the windows at the town shop for braziers, Shakespeare and Company, Zabars, people freely walking up and down the wide boulevards of Broadway doing stuff. My inalienable right to wander footloose and fancy free just got snuffed. I was in the back of a cop car with my hands cuffed behind me, headed downtown. The agent driving me was the same one who couldn't do dips. The car was hermetically sealed, quiet, almost serene. What's that exercise called, he asked. Dips, I said. Oh, and they're for your lower pecs and triceps mainly. Christ, what a fat fuck. I don't think I used to swim in high school, not drown, and actually beat people. Then he said as he casually turned down 12th Avenue, I have a feeling things are going to work out okay for you. I know they seem bad now, but I think you're going to be all right. Looking in the rearview mirror to catch his expression, I caught a glimpse of my own whiteness and figured it would give me a fairer shake. We arrived at 57th and 12th of the car dealerships and DEA headquarters, a shitty, almost deliberately depressing area of town. Jordan was already there. We usually pickle silly with each other, but now there was no silly, only a peculiar amount of mouth tension. We looked at each other as if this were the betrayal, discovery, we're fucked scene in the movie. We were processed, fingerprinted, photographed, and put in a cell together, both of us very weirded out. Jordan asked me what I told him. I said not much, just that the boxes were to be distributed. The bounce was there to cover the odor. The bags were to divvy the stuff up, that we used a scale to weigh the stuff, and that he, Jordan, was in charge. Jordan said that those were probably not good things to say.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks for
Thank
reading
you.
the first chapter of Bob Goes to Jail.
Thank you,
So I
sir.
want to talk to you about writing this book, and
Uh-huh.
you are without a doubt an actor, and I know I was going to talk to you about working through the book and how you wrote it, but let me just ask you a question.
Mhm.
And this is a funky question. How is writing a memoir like acting? How is it like being an actor?
Well, yeah, you had to remember everything. So you're going through it as you're writing it. And so that happened. And it was funny when I was told like it's a memoir, I was so disappointed because I wanted it to be a story. I mean, I wanted specifically from the front story being specifically the bust till the end, and that was it. And then I found myself taking these leaps into past life, and sometimes past life feathering what happened with what was happening at the present. And the idea of going into the past was sort of buoy up the previous chapter of the present. That was the idea.
Isn't
So
that isn't that kind of like being an actor? I mean, that you take a character and you feather it, to use your words, you
uh
feather it up with your own past life, and you kind of
yeah, well, the idea
figure
was
out
to sort of like how I
how to
ended up
be a
that way.
character.
Yeah, well,
Sorry.
the idea was to how someone from certain socioeconomic background, et cetera, ended up like that. And the next
Mm,
chapter after this first one, I have like my sister and I are doing coke in our
right.
stepfather's townhouse, and she's like 11 and I'm 15 or 12 or whatever ridiculous age it is. So it's just sort of like to show how insane our upbringing was, that I would end up doing like that. And then my
Mm,
mother comes pounding in, and then my sister ends up saving the coke. She's 11 years old, for Christ's sake. I mean, she was already an accomplished, drug consumer, at that age. And to have that sort of deftness at that age, as we all did, is unusual. And so I would buoy up the present chapter with past stuff. And in terms of acting, it was like, Yeah, but I think any writer is an actor because you have to
Mm,
get in the skin of what you're writing. I've read Styron's things where he's talked about, he has to walk around in the skin of these people. And I think
yeah.
any writer does. So I think any writer, you're not performing it,
Yeah.
but you're living it, and you want to put down as authentically as the character would speak, as the character would move, as the character would taste, smell, judge. So I think every writer I learned that during the process. I mean, I've written a
Mhm,
bunch of other stuff since. So,
mhm, mhm, mhm.
but
I mean,
yeah.
I found that with my memoir is that over the course of writing it, the character of me in the memoir became different from me. And it's
Mhm.
as if suddenly I was writing about this third person thing that was me, just so happened
Right,
to be me. It was
right.
me. And then slowly I had to figure out how to bring it back
Mhm.
into my body. Does that make any sense? It's like I created a character and then I had to figure out how to bring it back into my body over the
Uh-huh.
course of writing it. Which brings me to my main question to you. What I was really going to ask you is, how'd you write this book? I mean, everybody. The typical question is, why'd you write a memoir? Okay, let's blow that off.
Well, again, it
How
wasn't.
how'd you write it?
It started out. It was funny. There's a friend of mine in LA is also a writer, and I mentioned this to him, and we're old friends. And he said, "My God, I wrote a screenplay about this 1,000 years ago before computers. I lost it. Write it." So I said I wanted to do a one-man show about it. So I wrote 5 pages, thinking, "Wow, I wrote 5 pages." And I said it to him, and he's like, "Yeah, okay, you have more than that." So after I got him about, and then all he did was kept on going, "Good, more, more." And then he sat me down and said, "Look, treat this like a job every day, however many hours you can do. Give yourself a," and then I started giving myself 600 words a day, every day, blah, blah. And I turned around, all of a sudden I had 28 pages all of a sudden, which now is a drop in the bucket. But then it was like, if you're not a writer, 28 pages is a lot.
It
And I
is.
wrote it to him and I sent it to Greg and he said it was fantastic. I was like, "Whoa, thank you." And I said, I said, "So as a one-man show," and he said, "Well, I hate to tell you this, but it's not a one-man show." And I said, "Yeah, it is one-man show. It's like me just well, I hate to tell you this, you're writing a book." And I was like, I don't know how to write a book. What the fuck are you talking about? You crazy?" And he said, "Well, you're writing one." And I was like, "Oh,
Mm,
okay." And look, you're a writer, you've been a writer for a long time. I've only been doing this for 13, 14 years or something. When you're writing your first book, or you think, yes, I want to be an actor because I walk and I talk and I have feelings. So everybody thinks they
right.
can act,
Right.
which is also another joke because I mean, it takes years of training to really become a fine actor. But I mean, no one would fall off the truck and think, "I'm going to be a concert pianist just for the fuck of it." Um, so, but writing a book, I think for most people is like, "Oh my God, that's traveling the Atlantic to like whatever's across, that's my God, that's huge."
Right.
But he said to me, "Look, I found myself sitting down 5 hours a day. I gave myself 600 words a day. When I reached the 600 words, even if they were bad, that's it, you're done for the day. And then the next day I would review the 600 words to see if they were any good and keep what I would, if we go back, but every day. And then by that method, you turn around after 7 days, 7 times 6, you have 4,200 words, you have some heft. So,
That's
so
right.
that's how I did it. So I was very disciplined and I think I ended up writing it in like 6 months. And
I
yeah,
mean, 600 words a day is a really trust. That's a good clip.
yeah,
Right. I mean,
very good clip. It's
that's a
two
good
pages a
clip.
day. 2 pages
Yeah.
a day. Yeah.
Yeah, to be running along at. I mean, sometimes when I teach writing classes, I encourage the brand new writers to try 100 words a day, because
Uh,
just like you say, it's like you would
it's
never
new
run a marathon,
muscles.
right? You would never run
New
a
muscles, man.
marathon the first time. You would never go out, and if you wanted to run a marathon, you would never run a marathon the first day.
Yeah.
You would have to build if you'd never run before.
It's too
You'd have to.
scary. If you said to someone, "Write me 600 words," it's like, but 100 words, 50 words. Yeah. It's like, "Oh, I could do that." But it's a different discipline and it's so solitary.
And since you spoke about that discipline function, can you talk about, because I think it's really important as a writer, can you talk about what that discipline looked like for you? I mean, like literally, like physically set the scene. Like what was
I
that
was up in the
discipline
morning.
like for you?
Tybalt was, not with me by then, but I had my other dog Patrick. I was, this was. I found myself 7 o'clock. I found myself at my desk 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. I would go till about 12. Go to the gym, go do shit, come back at 3ish.
Mm.
Another couple of hours, walk Patrick, and for about an hour, come back 6, and then go till 8. That was the end of the day.
Mm.
If I got the 600 words in earlier, I'll knock off. But I had to have the 600 words. I don't care if it's bad. I don't care if it's Shakespeare. It has to be 600 words. And I had a counter. You have a counter at the the word, which I can only work. It's funny. I just wrote a play and I tried these other programs. I'm so used to Word. I'm like, fuck it. I wrote it in Word because I'm used to it. It doesn't lose shit. I mean, I'm like, oh my god.
I tried for a while to try all kinds of fancy writing programs, and in the end, I can't do anything outside of Word because
and it makes me paranoid.
It's too complicated.
It makes me paranoid. I lost shit, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Right.
On these fancy like writer's duet, and it's very fancy.
Right.
And I'm like, I'd rather do the indentation myself, and it looks stupid, but fine. I have it all there. I'm not going to lose it. Which is another thing, which was interesting. I had this ancient computer, WordPress, when I first wrote the book. And I remember I had this ancient computer with like monkeys in the back, like whirring wheels to keep it going. And I remember it literally like erasing huge swaths of the book. And I'm like, no, while it's going. And
no.
me going and having to reconstruct stuff because I lost it. And it's just, anyway.
That's always right. That is always the worst in writing is reconstructing, because of course you think you got it and now you're trying to recapture it. And it is an awful feeling because you're trying to recapture that thing that you think that you had. It's why I admire stage actors so much, because I don't know how they go out every night and try to recapture the same thing night after night.
Yeah, they're really, night. I mean, no, I started on stage. I love stage best. And it's just, I mean, and it's a shame. I was talking to my mom about it. It's a shame that all these great performances that we go to really are film, because that's what we can see again. But when you really, my mom and I were talking about it, the things that really, when I recall the ones that I was killed with are the ones I saw on stage, So, and I teach, and it's a shame because, they're different. Film and stage are just different. I mean, it's the same art form, but it's like tennis and ping pong. I mean, you're playing with rackets.
It is. So when I read the book, I kept thinking, and please forgive me, I think I've been around agents and the business for too long. But I read your book, and the thing that jumped into my mind, and this is such the typical speak of books, is that it was the Coen Brothers meets Celebrity Bio. And and what I like about that is that your book is very funny.
Yeah.
Like Coen Brothers, and yet it's very desperate at the same time. And there's kind of desperation into it, like a Coen Brothers thing. And yet you've got this kind of storied upbringing, and your family and your sister and your brother-in-law and all of them swirling around you. And you're caught in kind of desperate straits at that point. And it's really a kind of wild thing to try to pull off.
Well, Kira has one chapter, that's it. And she's never mentioned really again, except the end. And Kevin has a couple of, Kevin has very hardly in it at all. I mean, it's mainly about the other,
but
guys that dealt with.
Yeah, true. But nonetheless, your family is swirling around you. And I mean, you do have a rather storied past, and it's all swirling around you inside this actually fairly funny book that is also just at times so super sad and lonely.
And, always, definitely. And, well, that was that. I mean, that was, I think it's also when my parents got divorced, they were very middle class. There was no they weren't loaded. I mean, yes, they were Sedgwick. My dad had said whatever that meant. not much, really. I mean, but when my mom met my stepdad, all of a sudden, we were catapulted into this rarefied sphere. I mean, we were living with the greatest modern art collection in the world, and he was exceedingly abusive and brilliant man. I've never heard anybody talk like that out loud. He would speak in these perfectly formed paragraphs that would make Bill Clinton's head spin. I mean, it was just the shit that how he just dominated. I remember Pat Moynihan, who was then state senator, and Ben was entertaining him. And oh God, there was another woman who was running for senator. I don't remember, but people came to him, and everyone deferred. I mean, and my brother said the only one who never, he was at dinner with him and Jasper Johns, and that was the only time he ever saw Ben fumbling, because he's with Jasper Johns, and it's just, wow. But he was very difficult with us, and you were very, yeah.
I mean, that's the thing that's
tough.
It is tough, and that's the thing that struck me about the book, is that it's funny, it's chaotic, it's fast, and yet at the same time, there's kind of this there's these moments of kind of just lonely openness inside of it, and it's nice. I mean, that took you work to get to. It had to take you work to be able to get to that space.
Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of went along. I mean, it wasn't like I'm going to be sad here. It was just like I really, we need structure, right? Writing a book. Right. So I had the structure built in because I knew what happened, from from the night I got busted, remembered very clearly. And I remember that entire year, like back of my hand. So I was like, but also the stuff you brought up are sort of a huge part of my history, as everyone has huge benchmarks in their history, and seismic, is that right? Changes and catastrophes and shocks. And we remember those. So I was able to and they happened. So I was able to stick them in, So, I mean, it wasn't to, garner sympathy or something like that, but it was certainly it was a difficult time. It was funny. I remember when my sister first got together with my brother-in-law, she took him to the house that is in the book, and he looked inside. He was like, "Oh my God!" And she said, "Yeah, it's nice from the outside. It was pretty bad inside." And it was, I mean, it's in what we said in the book. I mean, we didn't see them for like a week. The place was so big, which is my kid. I'm yelling at him constantly. Where are you? What's going on? Where are you? I'm in his ear. He's only 9, but he's the exact same age I was when I moved into that house. So anyway, we're moving my stepfather. So anyway, yeah.
Part of your book, and I'm going to use the word you hate, memoir. Part of the part of the memoir is written in script form, in play form, script form, dialogue form. Why? Why did you choose to place part of it in that form?
I don't think I think there's only one chapter that I kind of did that.
Well, it enters into a few chapters. There are pieces that enter into chapters. There's one distinct chapter, and then there are other places in the book where it definitely enters, like chapter 22. It definitely enters into the chapter, and then the chapter goes back to prose. But it's that's a discussion between Rob and Linus and
sure,
that bit. So why this decision to throw it into play or script?
I remember those back and forth, and I remember just the language. I remember the language so clearly, and I just remember that the language could do it on its own. I didn't have to add to it, and it would be much more powerful just have them talking back and forth. So, and the character of Linus was, I mean, should I give away or don't talk about him? I mean, he
sure, go ahead.
He worked for our family. He ended up, I found out years later, raping one of my best friends who's also in the book. And he worked for us, and he was this we didn't know at the time that he was pedophile, but fascinating guy. I mean, remarkable, fascinating, brilliant, crazy. And I think my mother fell in love with him because of that. Because of he was just so out there. I mean, he was a devotee of Giorgione, the painter. He far preferred Marlowe over Shakespeare, and thought Shakespeare was nothing compared to Marlowe, and could actually recite these things, though. I mean, play classical recorder stunningly. And he taught us all our old music, like old Kinks, Lee Dorsey, you name it, when we were kids. So he had a huge imprint. Plus, my brother was an artist. He was the one who encouraged my brothers to pursue that. And when my brother was 15 at the time, and that's a huge imprint on someone when you get encouragement for that. And he was sort of a wandering minstrel, like fascinating Renaissance character, literally. And his brother did 2-year state for Coke distribution, and he would show up with the best Coke in New York because he was the dealer. And it was just, it was a big Lollapalooza. So when you had dialogue with Simon, he also spoke in a certain way that I thought that I couldn't improve on that. So I just put that, in that sort of form.
Right. Interesting set of choices, because not everybody make that. I mean, people like to play this form. Like in my memoir, I have certain chapters that are how-tos. So how to get a divorce, and they're literally written like as steps, like step 1, do this, step 2, do this, step 2, do that. And you kind of, I guess, I think, at least I found myself kind of restricted by the form, and occasionally I wanted to break out. And that sounds like what you're saying, is that you wanted to let kind of the characters, the dialogue, sit outside of the form somehow, and let them kind of just be themselves.
It was also my first book, so I didn't have a form.
Well,
so I didn't have that baggage. You know what I mean? I was just like, let's do this. Why not? I didn't have anyone going, no. So it's interesting, because you had if you're disciplined. I mean, sometimes I'll have new actors, and they'll do something crazy. I'm like, no, that was great. Terrific. Because I don't want to tell them no, because if they're disciplined,
right,
and humble,
right,
and if they're disciplined and humble, and they're doing their work, and they try something crazy, I'm like, great, man, follow your bliss, terrific.
I have a friend who was she was an actor for years. She's now retired, and she was in the traveling company of Man of La Mancha with Richard Kiley back in the 50s.
Wow.
And she claims that Kiley, in every single performance, Kiley made sure to drop one cue to make sure that you were paying attention.
That's great.
So he would drop a cue
that.
somewhere in some performance, and you never knew where it was in the performance that he would drop your cue, and you would be caught suddenly without your cue, and you had to be ready for it. You had to be prepared for it. It is. I find it wild. Let me say, before I ask Rob the next question, there's a chat function. It's probably at the bottom of your screen. If you want to ask Rob any questions, you can go there to the chat and open it up, and we'll just to warn you that everyone will see your question. So if you want to drop a question that you would like Rob to answer, or something that you would like Rob to address, you can drop it there. Or if you go down to the bottom of the screen, there's a raise hand function under reactions. If you pull that caret up next to reactions, you can raise your hand. And if you raise your hand, then you're going to have to unmute yourself and put yourself on screen and actually ask the question live. So you can do it either way. And if you want to ask Rob anything about his book or the process, or anything that you may have read in the book, please feel free to do that. Okay, so let me ask you my next question, Rob. So everybody, a book is such a funky thing, because everybody knows that no book is ever done. And what there is a stop, but it's not done. I mean, what's done look like, right? Like George Lucas constantly re-editing Star Wars. It's not done. You just keep doing it. So if you could go back and change anything in your book, what would you change? Is there something that you would change about it?
I hate to say it. I worked on that. It took me 6 months to write. I mean, and then I went through this blizzard of agents. I got Chris. What was Chris' names? Chris. Anyway, first agent edited it, and we didn't sell it. And my stepfather especially read it, and he was furious because he read the original, and he said, and he was upset, the family, blah 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 blah, and him, but he said, your voice is tremendous. I love your voice is tremendous, and that's what an artist needs. And then when they tried to sell it, I didn't read the edited copy. He did. He was furious because he said they edited out your voice. I read it 3 years later. They did. They completely homogenized everything. So I put everything back together again. Then I tried to do it online. And then that didn't quite work. Then I got in the New York Times, and Lynn Nesbitt, who's a pretty storied agent, we were back and forth, and she wanted to do it, but she wanted in the memoir form. I didn't know what the fuck the memoir form was. So I ended up tacking on 140 extra pages to it, and like adding a new house to the house. And she got close on, and any writer I spoke to said, you're set, you're done, you're having a career, you're 6 figures. She's Lynn Nesbitt, she's everything. We got really close on Knopf. Head editor Victoria Vicky, I can't remember her last name, she wanted to do it. Sunny Mehta did not. So then so I went from hallowed ground to Castaway, like so much awful, just like you're done. And then my cousin's husband, who read a book and loved it, was in touch with a woman, knew a woman, Emma Sweeney in New York, who was a book agent. And so we ended up connecting. She said, Bob loves your book. I'd love to take a look at it. It's not published. I said, sure. So I gave it to Lynn Nesbitt. She was like, yeah, he really loved the book. Is there another version of this book that you just gave me, or is this it? And I was like, well, that's the Lynn Nesbitt version. She said, oh, okay. Well, Lynn Nesbitt, wow. Do you have another version? I said, well, I have my old clunky version. So I gave her my old version. She was like, she's like, okay, that's the one we're going with. That's your voice. That's it. That's you. So we cut out all the Lynn Nesbitt shit. So I've been through so many iterations of this book. That's it. I'm done. I mean, the story continues, yeah, because I'm still alive. But that's why yeah, I mean, I'm so done with this book. And it was just like, and ironically, really, honestly, the book that got published is hardly at all different from what I wrote initially. I mean, it's really not that much. It's really not that. There are things here and there, but it's really not that much different. Structure is essentially the same. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
It's an interesting, long, process to. I think that there's this kind of theory that books somehow arise and then just hit the market. But as you just said, that is not exactly.
Oh my God.
It is. I try to remind people in writing workshops all the time that books are part of the entertainment industry, and they work like the entertainment industry, and it can be a brutal process.
It was awful. And it was awful getting so close on, because I remember Lynn, and I just for the people who are listening, I mean, she's a legendary agent, and I mean, she was the guy. She and what's his name? Roth's agent. What's his name? Andrew Wiley. Those are the two guys. They were it. Right. And so I thought like I had arrived, and with the Knopf thing, she was very hopeful. And Knopf's huge. And but then lost that, and then you were like, I was getting married, and I was like, Nowheresville again, and it was really very, very tough. You have to. It's funny, because I teach my actors, like, you have to turn over the result. It's the process. It's always the process. That's the fascinating thing. And the result, you just have to, just forget about it, turn it over. You can't, and that's almost like, it's not up to you, and you have to, that's the thing, you have to be involved. And certainly I find as a writer too, that's the joy. It's not like, gee, I hope they like it. I don't know if you're gonna like it. Maybe you're gonna hate it. Maybe you think it's stupid. Maybe you think I'm stupid. Like me, I can't affect that. And writing is, undertake it as a career or as a vocation, it's stupid. It's a waste of time. Just like acting, it's a waste of time. 1 out of 100,000 people make a living at it. And as my
Right.
mother said years ago about being an actor, you're either doing Hamlet every night or you're making millions of dollars. Otherwise, what's the point? And it's really true. There's no point. If you're tripping through the great roles, then that's so. It doesn't matter if you're making $300. Who cares? You're doing Hamlet. Fuck you. I don't care. Or if you're making millions of dollars, go ahead. Fuck you. Do Hamlet. I'm making millions of dollars. But in between, it's just like, it's really hard. So
Yeah, in my case, my husband and I had, by the time my memoir was published, my husband and I had published 35 cookbooks at 6 New York houses. And I thought, right? And then it took my memoir 2 years to sell, and it sold to a small art house. And I actually embraced, this is such weird, crazy crap. I actually embraced being a failure as my identity. And when my agent called and said a press had bought my memoir, I actually said no on the phone to her. I said no, because
really,
I said, you can't take away my wanting to be a failure. And she said, well, I'm about to take it away from you. But
yeah.
but I was like, no, this is me. I get to go to dinner parties and tell this sad story about that I wrote a memoir and it didn't sell, and everybody gets to look down and sip their wine and look away. And
But
I
instead
get
of if
I
you're
get to
giving
be
it,
this.
but if you're putting your best foot forward, if you're your best shot, if you're doing the best you can and really you put in, and it doesn't, is that a failure?
Well, I was taking it as such. I mean,
Mhm.
you're right, and I certainly in the course of our cookbook writing career, we have pitched many an idea to many an editor that has not been bought. But it was
Yeah.
different. It like, this is just me, and so I'm just going to hold it, and then I'm going to hold my failure.
Right.
And
Sure.
yeah, and she called me on a day after I'd worked out. And I was, just to be crass, I was literally getting in the shower naked when my phone rang. How else do you talk to your agent except naked? And I was getting in the shower naked, and I'm talking to her, and she's telling me this. And I'm thinking to myself, no, 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 no. No, 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 no. I get to be the person that goes around Litchfield County and tells this sad story at dinner parties, and
Yeah.
people dip their eyes, and I gather all the sympathy, and I don't know, you can't take that away from me. It was just it's all such a wild process. I don't think anyone is completely ever ready for the process. So we have a question from Amy, and Amy
Yeah.
asks for both of us, but Rob, I'm going to ask you first. The question is, we often hear that it is easier to be brutally honest in fiction because you can hide the reality in the characters. Amy, let me debate that, but okay, you can hide the reality in the characters. Did you find that you skipped things, or at least skirted around them to protect living people you care about?
There's one guy, and I'm not that close to him, but he was, yeah, I had to take him out. And I'm not going to talk about it because he didn't want to be associated with it, so I won't bring him up. But he took serious issue to it and made a huge stink. We didn't talk for 3 or 4 years or more, or something. I don't know. It's not someone I'm particularly close to, but so it's fine. But yeah, he took a lot of issue to it. So, and as far as being brutally honest, I don't know. I mean, no, I didn't. I found it easy to be brutally honest. Yeah, I don't think I was very nice to myself at all. So, but I sort of rendered it as it was, and writing other characters. Um, I don't know. I think I mean, for me, I just put myself in their skin, and I'll be as brutally honest as it has to be. Uh, what's commensurate to the character, I guess. But no, I don't. I think skirting from that, I think you should put up what's taboo and what's disgusting and awful and horrible, because that's real life. Otherwise you're reading a Hallmark card.
But you
So
did feel the need to take this one person out.
I was
Interesting.
told to. I was told to. So I did.
So it wasn't your choice then. You
No,
honored what
he had
he
a nice
said.
color. He had a nice color to it, but it's just like it was not the end of the world. So, but I just finished this play and I actually took out one of the scenes from the book and stuck him in the play to an imaginary character. This is the guy I made up in the play, but I used that. It was just too, and it was about a Porsche and his love for the Porsche, and how if you ever, I hope you find something in life you love as much as I love this Porsche, which I just thought was brilliant. And he handed a picture around to everyone, and everyone thought it was a picture of a girl, and it was a Porsche. So, oh, great, okay. So, but I had to take that out. But I stuck it in this play, which let's
So
keep our fingers crossed.
you got your revenge then.
Not
And
revenge, but it's just too good. I mean, real life, the shit you hear in real life is just so amazing. You know, if you listen, I mean, people say like the craziest shit.
they
You know,
do.
I mean, it's
They do.
amazing and it's fascinating. You know, I find it fascinating.
They do. And it's all for a writer, it's all fodder that's coming. And you kind of
Their
feel bad about
rhythms, where
that.
they come from,
Mhm,
what
mhm.
their mores are, how expansive or tight they are. What's the expansiveness within the tightness? Why are they tight? How is that? What's it? It's just fascinating. So
Yeah. And I want to say to this about this, Amy, I think that to your question, I think there's a way that it's actually not easy to bury it in character in fiction because fiction, you're already one distanced from your characters in a novel or in a play. If you're the writer, there's a scrim between you a bit, and you're constantly having to break through that scrim to touch your characters because
yeah,
you don't want that scrim to be there.
no,
And
absolutely not.
so I actually think it's quite a bit of work in fiction to make sure that you get the reality in there, because it's really easy, especially early writers, early screenwriters, playwriters, novelists. It's really easy to just kind of rely on the scrim. I sit back here, my characters, and act out here. And when you do that, your characters become puppets that are moving
Yeah, and
around.
then you start writing fancy, and it's just like,
And then you start writing fancy.
ugh, you know what I mean? It's just like we've all seen that. You want to
Yeah.
be like in their skin, and I've gotten accused of that. Like friends are like, okay, this is like, look what I can do. Don't do that. And you're just like, you're right. And it's stupid, and it's just like, and then you get into the feeling, but it sounds so good. And I love the sentence structure. Fuck the sentence structure. Who cares?
Oh, you hurt my old English
No,
prof
you
heart.
want the thrust. I mean, some of the most powerful things I've read are just, well, I mean, some of the stuff I'm loving your book because of that. I mean, it's very, the cert's perfect. You know what I mean? I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
I love
Uh,
that. I
Thank
mean, it's
you.
just like, but that's real life. I mean, anyway, so.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. When my agent hired an editor to work with me on that book and on my book, and I remember I turned in this draft once, and I thought I was being brutally honest. I thought I'd done a draft that was just like the editor was saying, this freelance editor was saying, come on, you got to push harder. So I turned on in this draft that I thought was brutally honest, and she turned it back to me, and all the freelance editor wrote was at the top of the Word document, which that she mailed back to me, was the first word that comes to mind is cowardly. And I thought, oh shit, I thought I was being
Ooh,
so
wow,
honest.
that's heavy, man.
And
Good for her.
and and yet I'm not, apparently haven't dug deep enough yet. And it
Wow,
it was
that's
interesting.
really heavy.
It was an interesting problem, and I think that goes back to why I started out kind of off the cuff. And I should tell everyone that I kind of told Rob the questions I'd ask him tonight beforehand, but the question about acting and writing I didn't tell him beforehand, and I kind of wanted to
And you
just
threw
catch
me
him.
off.
I know, and I want to catch you off your guard just a little so that you would like see. And I think that what you're just saying and what we're saying, you're saying, Rob, is bringing us back to acting in some way, because it's breaking that scrim, breaking through, right? Somehow breaking through to inhabit character, which is so important to
I think
writing.
in any art, though, I mean, you have to, whatever you're rendering, whatever your voice is, you have to be in that. And it has to be authentic and it has to be from you. Otherwise, who cares? I mean, it has to be. I mean, I went to the new Frick, and I hadn't seen that Rembrandt self-portrait where he's sitting on a throne. My friend Joe and I went, and you're just looking at that. And this is like 500 years old, and it's just how it how it stays on the nail. It's so ferocious. He can't paint hands, this Rembrandt. It's blah blah. It's just remarkable. He was getting into and we have to do that as writers. You have to do that as actors. If you're an artist, you should bleed it. I think. I mean, it should suck. And what happens in this country? I mean, other countries treat their artists better, but here, if you're an artist, you are a failure.
Well, unless you mean you're a failure,
Unless you're a raving success,
hit top
you're a
tier.
failure. You're a failure. So
Right.
that's how we treat, artists. I mean, I remember when I got I talk about it. I didn't say this in the a book, but I got a soap second out of college, and I would just say, and you're 24 and an idiot, and you're going to parties and people are just like, hey. And I said, what are you? It's like, well, I'm an actor. It's, oh yeah, what restaurant do you wait at? And I was like, well, I've been trying to get a waiting job, but my accountant didn't think it was a good idea because I'm making $1,000 a day on this television show I'm doing. So I'm going to have to put that in the back burner. Bye. But I mean, I was lucky, most people, it's just, it's hard. It's really hard. So
it is really hard.
yeah.
I think that goes back to your discipline comment from earlier, because I think that around here at my house, what we always say is writers write, actors act, singers sing, painters paint, dancers dance. I mean, and that's what you do. And if the question is, well, what are you acting in? Well, let's take writers. What are you writing right now? And if you say, I'm writing I'm trying a novel, I'm writing a script, I'm trying a new play, I'm trying out a monologue. Okay, you're writing. It may not yet come to anything, but you're writing. If you say, oh, I don't know, I'm not really doing anything right now, well, then you're not a writer. Right now, you're not a writer, because writers write, dancers dance, painters paint. That's what you do.
So Bella said that if you're writing every day, you're a writer. I mean, it's just
there you go.
And it's just it's so much of it is discipline and humility, and because it's such a colossal, all these things are such colossal crafts, that if you're humble and you're disciplined and you just do the best you can and you try to get into burrow, and then it's really and it's such a hard concept, but just fuck the audience, fuck everybody else. Just do whatever you believe in.
How do you do that, Rob? I mean, you're it's so great that you said that, and where do you find God help me, where do you find that self-assurance that you just
I don't know if I'm so
nailed?
self-assured. I mean, I've been rejected all over the place, but when you're sitting there and you come up with something and you're like, man, that's really good. Yeah. And you're not like, I'm so great, or they're going to love this. You're like, yeah, I think that's right, and hold on to that. I mean, because that means something and you're connected to yourself, and I mean, Vonnegut talks about this shit all the time, and he's so like, fuck everybody, whistle in the shower, sing, do this, everyone. It's a acknowledgement, and it's a revelation of your soul, and that's what I've been rejected so much all the time. Failure is like all the time. So, and we don't have a lot of time left. So I like to pursue stuff that gives me joy, and if it's bought and all that kind of stuff, great. Otherwise, you can't beat yourself up about it, because it's very easy to, and we're also in a society which is just so like star and celebrity and money and more money and
Mm,
colossal money and ridiculous money and
mm,
judging people and status and all that kind of horse shit. When you're
mm,
dying, it's just like, come on. I mean, it really doesn't mean much, you know?
mm.
So, and I think we need these little sort of, glories during the day to make it, don't you, to make it worthwhile, to make life like worthwhile. When I have a new student who
I
finds
absolutely
something,
agree.
when I have
I
students who
absolutely agree.
find shit, I'm so happy for them. I mean, it's just,
I,
anyway.
I think that if you're I think that if you're trying to write and if you're trying to act or whatever that your craft is, paint, i- if it's all misery, then
No.
there's something wrong. You have to, as you put it, as you just put it, you have to find the little glories every day. And
Yeah.
you're right. It has to bring you some kind of peace or joy somewhere along the way, or else it's you're not connected to it. Then you're connected to your misery. You're like me, you try to just play the failure at a Litchfield dinner party. Um, you're not connected to your source at that point.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How do you feel when you're not writing?
Well, it depends. It really, honestly, it depends. I feel the happiest when I'm writing. I like to write. I enjoy doing what I do.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm not writing, I feel like I wish I were writing.
Yeah.
Or I feel like I wish I were doing something. My cure for that, and that partly connects to my kind of weirdly ADHD but personality. My cure for that is to take my dogs for a walk, and then I kind of settle down, and I'm like,
Yeah, but that's
okay,
two
now,
hours and you get back to work. I mean, it's just
yeah,
like, yeah.
or I 2 hours, and then I can watch TikTok for an hour because I've like my brain has now shut down and
Oh,
been
okay.
quiet.
Oh, okay.
So
Uh,
either way, but I can find it in that specific place, and I think that in your book, Bob Goes to Jail, I think that there's this way that uh, your personality comes gloriously through, and it's the personality you showed tonight a bit. It comes through as a kind of um, I don't know what to say. It's a bit of a charismatic voice, and you've got this nice charisma about you, and it comes through in the book. And that's why I'm asking you about self assurance, because so many writers face so much doubt, and in your book at times it just especially in those childhood sections when you're doing Coke and 11, it just feels like it's so set and it's so right,
mhm.
and uh, it's a really nice place to be, and it's a really nice place to not feel a writer cracking under self-doubt at that
Mhm.
moment.
Well, thank you,
um,
Mark. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think that's a great place to be. So I think that we're kind of bumped on time here. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything. Let me give a second to just see if you want to add anything. Do you want to add a question? Do you want to ask Rob anything while he's sitting here?
Capital of
Before
Utah.
I,
no.
I
My
would
kid
just
knows all these things. My kid knows all these things.
I would just ask from the participant or from the co-host spot here about other. I know you're playwright, and I know you act and you direct and you coach, but do you have in mind or somewhere hiding in the back of your mind another work that reflects on some of the other stages in your life? I mean, you keep talking about discipline and humility, and I find myself wondering how it ties into this path of sobriety, which you obviously have found because you're still alive, right, and still with us. And I just,
Yeah.
there's
Whoa.
any, I mean, talk about brutally honest and the requirements of humility and discipline. I just wonder if there's another kind of piece in you that might come to the surface at some point.
Well, I just finished a play, so I'm just wrapping that up and send that off. And then I have another book that didn't go anywhere, but I kind of want to get back on that. And it was one of those things where the 27-year-old agent, who was the loveliest person in the world, who sold the book, who I adored, who didn't know who Philip Roth was William Styron, or who else did I mention that was influenced? I was just whoa, and she didn't like the book, so two other people loved it. So anyway, I'm going to get back to that and see what happens with that. And I went back to it. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of I'm going to sort of focus on that other stuff and then see what happens after that. So
as my literary agent says to my husband and me, every year they, meaning the people in the industry, every year they get younger and we're still here. So
yeah,
every year they're getting younger and we're still here. So here we are.
I will just add that the editor that you referred to at Knopf, Victoria Wilson, was a guest
Victoria
of ours
Wilson, yes.
in March. We did a program like this. She was the editor of a biography of Oscar Wilde behind me on my refrigerator.
Oh, wow.
By a guy named
Okay.
Matthew Sturgis who's British, a really revelatory, if you can imagine, about Oscar Wilde. And she's still around, so you might, I don't know. She's an interesting character.
she was the one who wanted to buy it. And
Yeah,
and then Sonny Mehta said no. So
now Sonny's gone and Regan Arthur is there. So
just to toss that out. But anyway.
So
who the hell knows? I don't know.
And I didn't mean to step in if anybody else in the audience wanted to either ask a question via chat or in person or live with their own voice or whatever we call it.
Who's my favorite football player? No. Okay. I love to box. We can talk about boxing. Okay.
You and I talked a lot about boxing. I think I talked more about boxing with you at the Sharon Book Festival than I've ever talked with anyone about boxing in my entire life. So
I've boxed a long time, so it's just like I love it. I tell you though, I do belong. I mean, we should get off and I'll talk to Mark about this, but I belong to a thing on Facebook. The only reason I read it is all these old boxing quotes. And these old boxing quotes are the most fascinating things you've ever read. There was a guy, God, I'm blanking on his name, but he said, "Boxing is a cruel and vicious sport. It is a cruel and vicious sport. It is a fight against yourself that you cannot win."
Oof.
I mean, Jerry Quarry said that. I mean, just brutal, brilliant. I mean, it's a brilliant sentence. And I was just like, Jesus. Anyway,
Well, if obviously we could keep talking or listening for hours and hours and hours, but we should let people go back to the rest of their lives. But I just want to thank both Mark with your deep insight into the author's works, and of course you, Rob, for joining us, and invite any of our guests to either check out the book. I work at a library. I'm in a past life.
You have a copy, I know.
Yeah, I was a bookseller, so you could buy it too, and it's a good investment and something to enjoy sharing with your friends. But thank you so much. What a deeply fascinating discussion that in some ways it takes you not in the same places, but the same unexpected twists and turns as the book itself. And so it really reiterates the reason that we should all be reading it, both as a reflection of your particular adventure and the way it makes us think about ours.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, the pleasure.
Thank you, Holly. And thanks, Rob. I love talking to you. So thanks, Rob.
Mark, it was so great talking to you. I was thrilled when I found out you were the guy. I was thrilled. I was like, oh, great.
He is the guy, isn't he? Yeah.
He's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. We shared that table at the book thing, and I thought, oh God, his book, somebody buys his book, somebody buys my book. And then we started talking. I was like, and I didn't care anymore. I had so much fun talking to Mark. It was like, who cares?
We'll let everybody know we'll have a recording of this up on our YouTube channel and posted on our website in the next few days. And so you can share it with friends and relatives and people that are thinking about perhaps writing a memoir or knowing what the real competition is out there for some tips. So
all right.
Thank you again, and thank you.
Good night, guys. Mark, stay in touch, man. Okay.
I will. Thanks, Rob.
All right.
Talk to you
Thanks
soon.
so much. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye. Night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.